Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. So welcome. If this is your first time at Shop Talk, glad to have you in here. This is anything above number one, like Anders, looking out for number one, then I guess we're still glad to have you. It is actually a marginally decreasing amount of gladness over time, so the curve will slope downwards. It'll slope asymptotically.
Reverse hockey, the hockey stick, the reverse hockey stick.
Yes. So, but that is the marginal gladness. The aggregate total volume of gladness still increases. It's just increasing at a slower rate, so it kind of flattens off. But it never goes down. We will never be less glad to see you, unless you're Anders. So, Shop Talk. If this is your first time here, basically this is a few people shooting the breeze after a day of work. Talking tech, talking certain topics. We've got a few items on the list, but this is also an opportunity for chat to derail us and sometimes re-rail us. So our chat, the derailleur. And I'm just happy that 7 Days to Die finally went to 1.0. And after being early access since a decade ago, that's very early access. But, I'm glad for you. I've not played that. I don't know that I would play it, but I have no problem. No problem if anybody wants to play it. I will allow it. All right. We have a few things to talk about. Your mother and I, we've got things that we want to discuss. But before we do that, we have here with us the one and only Mike Christensen. Now, Mike is on mute, but that's just because I don't know that the audience deserves to hear the glory.
Wait until your tri-pass comes home. That's what I'm saying.
Right. So, welcome in, Mike. Tracy and Mala are not here. They are starring in a buddy cop film that you're going to see in a couple of years. All right. First topic for the night. There's a survey. It's not my survey, but it's a survey about SQL Saturdays. And hopefully the URL is sqlsaturday.com/survey. And that's going to take you to a survey. So let me share my screen so we can talk about this survey. We could survey the survey. This is something that Steve Resner put together, and Steve Jones is officially promoting it. But basically, the idea is what you want to see in SQL Saturdays in the future. And that could be in your region. It could be in concepts around, well, how experienced are you in certain areas, and what kinds of sessions would you be interested in seeing? So there are a fair number of radio buttons, but don't be too scared. You only have to click on one radio button per line. You could click on, you could like do this, but it's not going to help anything. So just there's fewer radio buttons when you think of it as all radio buttons are one radio button. World for number 2, possibly Mars. The problem with the Martian event is that you're not going to be able to get back. So that hotel is going to get expensive pretty fast. Also, I don't know of any Martian hotels that offer free breakfast. So that would be 2 initial problems. But you know what? If they put together like a Hampton Inn on Mars, all right, I'm in. So there are plenty of questions in here, plenty of things to check out. I have nothing to do with the survey, but would say, yeah, if you could, folks, take some time, fill that out, provide some information. How are they going to collect? That's a fair point.
The one-way ticket.
SQLSaturday.com/survey, and you can also check out the SQL Saturday survey results. And it turns out it takes people almost half an hour to complete this survey. That's why I was trying to explain. No, it looks like you have 5 times as many radio buttons, but really you only have 1/5 as many radio buttons. So don't get too confused by the radio buttons. Actually, the most confusing thing about the survey is they don't quite explain your experience level is whatever at for this particular topic, or
Right.
you're interested in seeing sessions at this particular experience level on a topic, and that could be two separate things.
I
But
mean, a lot of people want to know about Windows.
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, okay, a lot of people will consider themselves, and the distributions are interesting. Where many people will say, I have, and I'm, the first section says not interested. So I'm not interested in a session. That makes sense. And I suppose the rest of them are, I would be interested in a basic level session or intermediate level or advanced level or expert level. Or I consider myself an expert on Windows or advanced on Windows or intermediate on Windows. It's a little hard to tell. There's a fair number of interpretations for these. That said, I think it is interesting just to see the splits where a third of people not interested in Linux, a third of people not interested in Hyper-V. Same thing with VMware. Same thing with Docker. So you have a third of people, the people who just don't care. And I like to imagine that it's literally the same people that they just don't care about any of this.
Right. Well, SQL Server, right? Like, this is this is absolutely fascinating. I think this is like more encouragement to like let us fill it out, please. The people that have opinions, like Anders.
Yeah, and this is really badly worded. I agree. Some of the questions I think there could have been some proper survey design, and survey design is a lot harder than it seems. It is
Mixed
really
methods, a
yeah
big deal.
yeah it is
My
a real
wife, my wife's getting her PhD, and I have been hearing a lot about it. Let me tell you.
yes. Not only in terms of asking the questions in such a way that you don't lead people to a specific response, but making sure that you cover all of the possible responses and that you have to write it in a way that people are actually going to answer. So you have to try to incentivize people to answer, but without lying to you. And you don't want to lead them down a particular direction because just the way you ask a question or the way that you order questions, there can be an effect on how people answer them.
And you're absolutely right. And I just me looking at like private cloud, aka on premises, Windows, I'm like, that doesn't even make any sense because in my mind, I'm probably the least technical in the TriPass group, but like Windows is like on your machine, right? And I mean, you can have a cloud Windows machine, you can have a VM, but I don't think of Windows as cloud. And I mean, maybe if you're like a network engineer, yeah, but that question is nuts to me.
Right, right. And so I personally interpreted it as what is your skill level?
Mhm.
And yeah, the private cloud, we call on premises private cloud now. I consider on premises and private cloud slightly different concepts, but you can make an argument on premises as a private cloud. I think that
Or market.
you need to have a couple of pieces. It can't just be Bob's server hanging out in like the shop room and that's our cloud. But then again, the cloud is just other people's computers. So I don't know. Nonetheless, even right now in cloud, so we have Azure like 10% not interested, AWS 15% not interested, GCP more than half of them not pass on that. Oracle Cloud, I do love this. 78% of people not interested in Oracle Cloud. Snowflake, more than half. I actually was a little surprised by the lack of interest in Snowflake.
Yeah, some of my colleagues are using Snowflake. Yeah, my old
Yeah,
colleague.
and IBM Cloud 80% no dice. I get that. So I interpreted some of this as what is your level of experience versus the level of topic you'd be interested in. And to that extent, I don't know if we have Dunning-Kruger here with SQL Server, but I do like SQL Saturdays. 1.5% of people are not interested in SQL Server. So,
I hope Grant Fitchy is reading this already, because he's gonna make a lot of money going to a lot of presentations.
right. But DB2, 72% of people, almost 73% of people, not interested in DB2. And I think those people are probably right. So you could have
People that know about DB2 know about DB2. I mean,
now,
like, you know,
the real question is ZOS or not.
you got me on that.
The answer is no, neither. But
Trick question.
I guess I would be mean to DB2 just because what's the worst that they could do? They can only send 8 characters at a time. So
Right, that's from the 80s, right? Like, it's, I mean, I know it still exists.
Even today, DB2 has column limits of 8 characters, as I recall. The column names. Maybe it's increased, but my recollection was 8 is still the limit. It's an IBM product.
My last name is Christensen. It's got a lot more than that.
80s, DB2 on mainframe is ancient, even compared to me. Yeah. And as much fun as I'm making of DB2, including on ZOS,
I wouldn't have been able to invent it. So
I don't want to use it, but for people who do use it, I'm not. Look, if that's your livelihood, I'm not knocking it. However, yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen a DB2 related session at a SQL Saturday. I might have, but I I'd never gone to one. So I don't know that I've ever seen one on a schedule. And I've seen a lot of SQL Saturday schedules.
So it's not a really well used question.
It is not a okay. The
So
overlap.
if you have a question quotient, you didn't utilize it correctly.
Yeah, I would say this was more of we're just going to find the top databases, the top databases and database platforms, and just ask, hey, are you using these? Andrew says, oh, it's huge, just not in this community. And I think that's still fair. I would dispute its hugeness, its hugosity. And I'm going to go to DB Engines to confirm or deny my assertion. It is definitely the bottom rung of the relational database world. So let's take a quick peek at the ranking. DB2 is number 9 on their list.
Which is not bad when you think about the world.
Yeah, I mean, SQLite is a little bit below it. Microsoft Access is below it. But, you have Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server, Postgres. So all 4 of those, and DB2 is down below. Is the mainframe version in that? Yes. However, DB Engines has their own method of calculating these scores. Like, for example, I think SQL Server is actually higher than than this DB Engine score indicates, because what's happened is you have a lot of split out into Azure SQL Database and SQL Managed Instance and other parts of the Azure SQL platform that kind of bifurcate the level of how they calculate. So I think it's an imperfect measure, but it is a reasonable attitudinal measure, meaning I believe these would be the biggest products. I do believe MongoDB is a fairly large product. Redis is a fairly popular platform, and I wouldn't necessarily say these numbers are exactly right, but if you were to say, oh, MariaDB versus MySQL is owned by Oracle, I sympathize with MariaDB, but yeah, we see MySQL much more often in the wild.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And this is a weird thing that's like off topic, but this is a thing that's public, and I'm not saying anything that people don't know, but I have been talking about this for a long time. So I joined the group in 2018 because we're going to transition to SQL Server, and Oracle bought Cerner, right? So Oracle is now technically a competitor of Epic. So so in the healthcare sector, which is a small, I mean, it's trillions, but I'm just saying that, like, there's a lot of healthcare databases that are based on Oracle that are not going to be in the next 3 years. So I would not be shocked to see Oracle get knocked off their database spot to 3 or 4 in the next 5 years, because
Maybe.
that's a Mikeism. It's not Fiesel's law. It's just Mike. It's just a Mikeism.
Right. No, that's fair. And we have seen change over time. Indexed flat files is probably bigger than any of them. I mean, let's face it. If Excel were on the list, it would be number one with a bullet. Excel is the biggest database in the world. And I hate myself for saying that out loud. All right. How DB Engines does its calculations. And mind you, DB Engines is not the only organization that provides relative rankings of different data platforms. It's just the one that I know off the top of my head, and the results seem reasonably reasonable. And I use that advisedly. It's reasonably reasonable in that they seem to justify enough of my priors that I don't look at it and say, wow, your numbers are way off base. And there's enough clustering further down that, yeah, something could actually be in the top 30 when it's really marked in here as 55, but that there's not a huge amount of difference. Like I'll talk about the mechanisms for ranking, but if we look at number 30 here, which is Firebird, it has a score of 20.41. And if we look at number, let's say 70, Single Store, that's 4.12. I mean, there's a fair difference between those. So you should be able to say Firebird versus that other platform. But Synapse versus PostGIS versus Influx versus Firebird, and you say, I mean, they're all close enough to each other that we're probably talking about, if you flipped around orders, I don't think I could say, no, this ordering seems wrong. I think they're all within the same range of how people have adopted them. And their particular mechanism for calculating here, number of mentions on websites. So they search for Google searches and Bing searches. General interest using Google Trends data. Technical discussions on like Stack Overflow and DBA Stack Exchange. Job offers that mention these platforms. Profiles in professional networks where they mention these platforms. And utilization in X. So a lot of social media, a lot of affinity measurements, which means that the hot new data platform technology probably gets overstated. Yeah. And something like a DB2, you could make the argument, hey, DB2 is understated here because the type of person who is a DB2 administrator is probably not going on X and tweeting a whole lot, is probably not necessarily putting so much of that information in a professional network. There aren't going to be a lot of job offers that specify DB2 because that would scare people away. And so, it may be a sufficiently different audience versus, say, some other data platform technology like BigQuery, which Google definitely wouldn't try to push BigQuery up in Google Trends. Never. They're very honest people at Google. They won a truth-telling contest 2 towns over. Or
So
SAP
mad at
HANA.
you.
So
I'm just mad at you because you're very technical and you're really, really, really funny, which is like my whole niche. So that's a compliment.
I appreciate that. The $20 is in the mail. But that's the idea. So, all right, DB2.
So can I just say on your point? I just wanted to, this is just I'm going to let on your point. So you were the one that introduced me to F sharp, and a lot of folks that I have because of .NET and .NET Rocks and stuff. There is not as much on the internet about C sharp, and I think that what I have come to the conclusion is they're not all posting about like, oh, I made this Python package and I can do this and this. They're just doing their stuff, right? Like they're not posting as much in the C sharp world because they have what they need. They know what they need to do, right? So anyway, you and others gave me the confidence to be like, all right, well, just because it's not trending online or all the videos on YouTube doesn't mean it's not a productive language. Like, if you're smart enough to know Haskell, that's great. Go for it. And if you're a C sharp developer, go for it. Like, Python is probably the most Googled, but it doesn't mean much in terms of what you need to do to get your job done.
I will partially agree, partially disagree. The area of agreement is I do think that a fair number of languages are pretty stable, and so you don't see a lot of new posts and content, but there's still a lot of code in the language and a lot of people who use those languages. And I'm thinking stuff like C or C++, where you won't necessarily see a lot of hot new blog posts about this is this neat thing that I did in C++. C++ still changes. It's still I'm looking at the Stack Overflow developer survey, and this is specifically professional developers, and I believe that this was the affinity mark. So this is common usage. Yeah, okay. So this is people who use a particular language, and JavaScript, I mean, using JavaScript versus really using JavaScript is 2 different items altogether, I think. So, we do have the most frequently used languages, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. I mean, that's just, you have a website. Everybody's building on websites. But like I said, I can say that I have used JavaScript. I would not say that I am a JavaScript developer. And that's there's a big difference there. SQL, Python, TypeScript. I mean, TypeScript fits in the same with the JavaScript here. Shells, again, if you're a developer, you're using a shell, but that doesn't mean you are a shell script developer. How many script files do you normally create? If the answer is a lot, then that's cool. But we have Java, C Sharp, C++, PHP, again, web language, and C. Well, out of these, these are languages, actually all 5 of these languages. I'm trying to highlight C, but it won't highlight. There we go. All 5 of these languages, these are fairly old languages. They still have changes that happen. I mean, you have C# 12 coming out soon. There are new additions to the language. So it's not like it's a dead language in the sense of we're not creating new versions of it. But C# is 20 years old. C++ is what, 35 or so. C is almost 50 years old. Java is coming up on 30 years. And PHP, I think, is over 20 years old at this point. So there's a lot of opportunity for people who have built out code in these languages, and I expect there to be a good amount of stickiness. Python is the weird one in this case because it has taken over so much of what shell scripting used to do and some of these languages used to do.
Right.
Plus that we've had other languages like R or Scala. You can see that I think it has cannibalized a lot of those languages. But nonetheless, going through this list, F#, 1%, but they all love it. Half of those searches are, can a Python kill me? I mean, that is also possible.
I'm 10% of those because I've been trying to learn it because you've been a good mentor. I have Visual Studio on my home computer. So as an example, while you were talking, it's Jen's. I got a couple of years ago. I got Modern C by Jens at Stunts. And he lives in France, and he's on the C committee. And so he wrote a book like without getting into the C, he was like, C is all the things that you know and the group knows, but also like let's modernize it. Like let's not just like use the thing that you had from 1977 and like run it and hope that the C99 compiler can run it. But like, this whole discussion has brought that up, like regardless of Postgres being at the top and C being in the middle or really low.
Well, no, I went down to the next section. JavaScript is at the top. C is it's just outside the top 10.
Right. So I think this group is all kind of savvy to the fact that I mean, you have to know a little bit of JavaScript to survive. There's no question. And SQL is Fiesel's law, right? And then Python is the new hot scripting language, has been for data science, right? So, but nonetheless, you need to get your work done. And the way to get your work done is to work with your colleagues and use the stack that you have and do the best you can.
Right. That makes sense. RPG is not on the list. No, it's not. Nor do we even have mumps, but we do have APL.
Yeah, mumps is what Epic is based on.
Yes, that would definitely be on the most hated languages list.
Really complicated. And they're actually, one of my colleagues, Alejandro, he is awesome. He knows mumps, which is impressive.
I feel bad for him.
He's a grumpy guy.
That makes sense.
He would, if he's watching this, he would commit. He would be. I agree with
that. Yeah. And as far as databases go, this is another thing that I wanted to point out is, hey, your particular survey that you're choosing can make a huge difference. So the Stack Overflow, professional developers, Postgres, MySQL, SQLite, SQL Server, Oracle is way down here. DB2 is way down here. But that's just among people who are Stack Overflow users who have filled out this survey. That's
I'm 48, and I'm telling you right now, I haven't filled out anything ever.
Yep. And there's...
Yes, if you're 25, you might.
Right. So, you're talking 60,000 responses for professional developers. That's not... I mean, it's a fair survey size. And I think it gives you probably a reasonable idea of, among the people who spend a lot of time at Stack Overflow and are willing to answer a survey, that this is what they're using. So I would imagine it's probably, again, this is probably attitudinally accurate for the sample of people who regularly visit Stack Overflow. You're not going to find many DB2 questions and answers on Stack Overflow. And as a result, you'll probably not find a lot of DB2 developers or administrators on Stack Overflow. So basically, your sample matters a lot. And Solomon says, not sure about mainframe DB2, but DB2 on Linux, and I assume Windows as well, has an identifier limit of 128 characters or bytes. Testing version 11.1 and 11.5 seems to be the most recent. Okay, so.
Oh, he looked like he's been challenged, audience.
But here, let's try this out.
He's going to actually Solomon.
Call 1.
Oh my gosh, real time.
We're trying it. We're trying it, people.
Integer.
Yeah, I don't even remember how to. Run. Okay. So this is what I was talking about, the column name. That those for a long time it could be eight characters or fewer. And there we go. Oh no, column 1. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, so it did actually create a longer...
I'm not trying to be the police. I don't think that's what you said earlier. I think you were saying that the actual storage was lower.
No. I was saying that the column name, so the identifiers.
Okay. I was wrong. Yeah.
Table name and column name should be the same limit. Should be. In this case, they might be. So it could be that newer versions of DB2 no longer have that limitation. I know older versions, absolutely, it was 8 characters. Yeah, Solomon agrees. So apparently you can now use more than 8 characters. So I guess a DB2 user could, in fact, use Twitter.
It's so unfair that you're smart and funny. Unfair.
So yeah. Going back to the survey, we have some examples, and a fair number of people, sadly, 50% of people say no to learning R. A quarter of people say no to Python. Half of people say, no, I don't want LLM sessions. But only 38% say, no, I don't want generative AI sessions, when their large language models are what people are talking about with generative AI.
Shoot.
And 37% say, no, I don't want to learn about deep learning techniques.
So can we make a quiz like you can't take this test until X?
You could, but then you would severely limit your audience.
Okay. And then it would all be Postgres. Yeah, I get it.
Ha. Yeah, it would be a little tricky. But anyhow, yeah, folks, you can fill in the response, SQLSaturday.com/survey, and maybe you could be person number 69. It may take you half an hour to do it, but the survey is still active.
Not Solomon and Anders, no way.
Anders has already given up.
5 minutes.
Anders said no to this noise.
But you could be the solution, Anders.
I think he would much rather be the problem. All right, next thing that I want to show, actually I want to have that window right there, because found the DB2 info. Oh, good. SQL XML.
Azure Data Studio, thank you.
Uh-oh. That came up in the wrong tab. I gotta bring it over to this tab.
Oh, okay. Sorry, yeah. T-SQL v6. That's ITSIC database.
That is ITSIC table. All right. So Solomon points out that all these identifiers are now, most of them are at 128, which I consider a perfectly reasonable number. So, okay. I'll have to stop making fun of DB2 for that specific reason.
Oh man, you're getting like called out by the chat.
That's normal. That's something we encourage here on Shop
I
Talk.
tried to log into Twitch and I can't, so I'm not seeing I'm not seeing the stink eye that you're getting.
No, there's nothing of that. It's Solomon just pointing out that, hey, the numbers have changed. You know, that DB2 issue was for older versions, which admittedly, the last time that I was involved with DB2 was working for a state agency. So, you know, they probably had 10-year-old DB2 at that point in time because
You
upgrading
can't.
to a newer version,
Yeah, it's an active. It's an act of Congress. Yeah.
right, or at least the state legislature. So the next thing that I want to mention. So yes, this is T-SQL v6. This is Itzhak Ben-Ghan's database that I'm using because I like it. I like it.
I have it on my home computer and my work computer.
Yeah, it's a good
Don't
database.
don't tell anybody.
Huh. So this is actually a question that Tracy wanted to talk about last time she was on the show, and it is about pagination and different pagination techniques. And I told her, hey, I've got a demo specifically on this, and I'm going to drop a link to the GitHub script where I've got this covering a change in SQL Server 2012, and specifically, let's come on down a little bit further. Fetch and offset. All right. There are a few different ways to perform pagination. And Tracy had mentioned, all right, learning about fetch and offset. And I said, I wish fetch and offset were better. So I figured I'll spend a moment talk about what I mean. So this is 3 different ways of performing pagination and I know that there are other ways to perform pagination, but stick with me for a moment here. So we have what I'm calling the nested top approach. So the idea here would be if I have, let's talk about what we mean by pagination. I've got a whole bunch of records in a data set. I've got maybe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of rows that would come back as in a result set. On my web page, I don't want to have 100,000 display items. First, it would take forever to render. Second, it would be incredibly difficult for people to find the item that they want. Third, most of the time, we don't need to display nearly that much information. Fourth, it may actually cause browsers to crash. So we typically display a small subset. I want to show 10 rows, or I want to show 20 records, or
something like that.
Yeah. And maybe have a little page selector where we can say page 1, page 2, page 3, etc. This is such a common pattern on websites, and it's interesting that it is a reasonable challenge to do it well in a database because we have a few possible techniques, but it's hard to make them efficient. So this is one of them. Let's say that our page size is 10. So I want 10 records per page, and I want to start on the 4th page. So first will be 1 through 10, second will be 11 through 20, 31 or 21 through 30, 31 through 40. And I want to get that 4th page. How can I do that? Well, I can get all of the orders here, and I need to get the top page size, 10, times page number, 4, to get the top 40 records from this sales.orders table, where whatever filter conditions I have are in place. Order by the order ID ascending, and then I can take the top page size from this order by my order ID descending. So in other words, what I'm doing is I'm taking ascending order, and then I'm getting the top 10 in descending order, and I'm basically telling my application, now you have to resort these the other way around again, because I'm giving you 40 through 31. But this does, in fact, give me 10 records, and it does give me records 31 through 40. Andrew says Crusoe, which I guess is he's going to say the Robinson Crusoe method, which is to just strand your users on an island and make them survive on their own. And I'm okay with that technique as well. So that's one. The second one here is the prior key. I'm going to say, you know that you have seen up to ID 10599, and you want a page size of 10. So we're going to say, give me the top 10 where whatever filter is in place, and the order ID is greater than my prior key, sorted by the order ID ascending. And if you don't have one, then prior key could be set to 0 or to int min or whatever. This actually is very efficient. So if I look at the execution plan for the first one, we're doing it in Azure Data Studio, but it should still work. We can see we have a clustered index scan of orders. And if I mouse over...
the sort. Yeah, the sort's killing you.
Yeah, then we have a compute scaler to get my ID number. I have top to get the top 40. Then I have another sort, and then I have another top. Now, that percentage, those are query bucks percentages. I don't necessarily trust that they are...
Those are query bucks.
Yeah. So I don't trust that those are accurate. But what I am going to do, I'm going to open up SQL Sentry Plan Explorer by SolarWinds, who has definitely done a lot of good things with SQL Sentry Plan Explorer by SolarWinds, and have certainly made the most out of their purchase of SQL Sentry and Sentry 1.
I actually have it. I've learned nothing.
Yeah, all right, let me now switch applications. So I'm going to stop screen sharing. I'm going to share screen again. We're going to go to a window, SQL Sentry Plan Explorer by SolarWinds, and zoom in here. So what we have, we could see that we have a column with no statistics. I'm not too concerned about that. This is actually not that bad to run because it's just a few rows. But as your data set gets larger, the problem is that when you're scanning, I need to get page size times page number rows. So if I need page 207, then I need to scan through to the point where I'm at page 207. I don't think there are enough records in here to actually get to page 207, so this may not be a practical difference. Nonetheless, it's not going to perform the best, especially as you have larger data sets. So the second option is the prior key, as I mentioned. And the idea here would be, I know what my prior key was. I know that we got up to this point in the application, and then just give me the next 10 after that point. And the performance difference in here is actually fairly significant. And if I leave the original query in, and then I put in the second query, we'll get a relative query bucks difference here of nearly 2 to 1 in terms of estimations for cost. Fewer reads, and actually, let me go back. I'm going to go back there. I'll put it at 4 again, just to try to make it as fair as possible. So we have, actually in this case, because the database is so small, same number of reads. We're still reading the same pages, but that's because I'm doing a clustered index scan on orders. Technically what we're doing is a range scan, and that range scan is going to start a little bit further in. Nope, it's not even doing that. I'm now looking at the page results, and it's reading 497 rows because I didn't put statistics on the table, so I guess it doesn't know when to start. So that kind of defeats the purpose of what I was talking about. Good thing that I don't actually talk about that in the session. But in practice, when you do have tables with statistics and with larger data set sizes, That prior key approach tends to be very fast, very efficient. And then the third option is fetch and offset. Now, fetch and offset are reasonably easy to understand syntax-wise, because I can say declare page size is 10, page number is 4, give me records from sales.orders, offset this many pages. What's weird is we have to say offset is up to our starting point. So page number -1. If I want page number 4, I have to go page 3 times 10 rows and then fetch the next 10 rows. So give me 31 through 40. So the end result is actually it's going to be pretty much the same performance profile as the first one, but query bucks wise, it may be a little bit more efficient simply because we're taking advantage of a clustered index and don't have an explicit second sort like we do in the nested top version. So it's a little bit more efficient than the nested top just because I don't have that second explicit sort. However, it's not going to be as efficient as the prior key approach when you have a large data set and you're further in. The more pages you go in, the more you have to scan the data to get to the page that you need. And I think that's the problem. The main problem with this entire pattern is I wish that we had an easier mechanism for maybe holding some data in a session state, like a query response while this session is open, and hold the data in tempdb in a temp table, and then pull it out as you need it so that you don't have to recalculate. Because this is a very simple query, but if you imagine that you have a rather complex query to get to your results, and you're displaying results 1 through 10 of 25 million, but then the next time you click, like on page 2, you have to recalculate everything, that can be rather expensive. But there's every mechanism that there is to solve this kind of a problem either requires a lot of network transit. You're sending 25 million records over the network to the application server, which is going to cache that data, or requires repeated querying of the SQL Server, or requires that your data is effectively static. And that's the problem with this approach, the prior key approach. We're assuming that 10.599 stays as the last key, and that nothing new pops in that's earlier, that has a value lower than 10.599. We're assuming that the next set is always after 10.599. If that changes, maybe somebody updates 10.593 and you're supposed to show that again because we've rejiggered the results, then you'll miss it. So that can be a risk of this pattern. It's faster, but you risk possibly not showing a data update that you really should have.
Yeah, and if you're like, this is like a unique example, but if you had to like restate earnings from 2 years prior, right, something like that, this would be a big problem.
Yeah,
I mean, in earnings restatements don't happen that often, but if that's what your particular role is, that'd be a problem.
Yeah, although in this scenario, I think that would be a less common occurrence. Where this would be a problem would mostly be high activity tables, high activity, high updates, and where those updates are enough to change the ordering of your data sets.
Gotcha.
And where you really care about it. Like if I'm looking at a product listing or a set of Google search results and we miss one of the results, or I miss a product, it's not necessarily the end of the world. If there are 5,000 other products that are similar enough to it, then I may still say, I found the product I'm looking for. But if we're looking at a scenario where I do need things in an appropriate order, then we're kind of limited to either hit the database every time and soak up that cost every single time, and actually soak up an increasing cost as you go through the data, because we need to fetch this many rows plus this many rows for every single query. So as page number goes up, you're fetching more and more rows.
Right.
Which means that if I click on page 1 is probably pretty fast. If I click on page 100 is probably slower than page 1 was. And if I go to the very end, it's going to be the slowest, because we have to scan through the entire table or the entire result set to get our last few rows. And that technique is, it seems like there ought to be a better way to do this kind of pagination in a way that is reliable and not repeatedly hammering the database. But there aren't that many good results. I mean, in a lot of cases it's, we're going to bring the data back and cache it in Redis or cache it on server memory, which that means fewer database hits, but it also means that your cache can get out of date, and that may be a problem. But still, this was something Tracy wanted to talk about, so I figured, I would share. Here's a few different ways of doing it. I don't know that there is a perfect way to do it in T-SQL or in any dialect of SQL.
Any, right.
Yeah, I think everything here is just a trade-off of, you're going to have worsening performance over time. You're going to take advantage of the fact that people rarely go past page 1 or 2, which that can go to your benefit here.
You nailed it with that. That was a good statement. Exactly.
So Marshall says, sometimes the cache is important to have consistency in the results from one page to the next, which is a completely different problem when you have async queries for different pages of results. That is true. Yeah, and you can use the cache as a way of getting there. And so I could see that benefit. I could also see the downside of it being that by caching, we now lose changes in the results, because we're probably not invalidating the cache every time. And every time that there's an update of the underlying table, because that would, on a busy system, that would kind of invalidate the idea of caching, like bring into question why would we even cache if we're just constantly invalidating it. But yeah, if you have async queries for different pages of results, sure, you could end up with the same product showing up on 2-3 separate pages, depending on just how long it's taking for those queries to run, when they started, what snapshot of the data they're looking at, and just how frequently things are changing in the meantime. And it is a hard balance to figure out what makes the most sense. It takes a smart developer to know what they should be doing for their situation. I agree, and there are solutions to this. I'm slightly surprised that there hasn't been a really good pattern to this. I guess it goes back to, I had a professor in college who said, computer science is a world of trade-offs. Computer engineering, they don't get trade-offs. They get miracles. You have new hardware. This new hardware is just faster. Hey, we created this thing. It's 50% faster. We have Moore's law. Look, our transistor counts are increasing, or performance is constantly increasing over time. Computer scientists, we don't get miracles. We have trade-offs. Everything is a trade-off. You can do this, but it's going to cost you down the line. You could do this other thing, but it's going to cost you up front. The only miracle we ever got in computer science is the fact that when we hit a page in memory, the next thing we expect to hit is probably in that page, which is why paging actually works on operating systems. Because we pull in a page of memory, the next thing that we want is most likely on that page. If it wasn't, if it was just randomly distributed, until recently, performance would be absolutely awful for everything. So we got our one miracle and we get to ride it as hard as we can. Otherwise, everything's a trade-off. And I think that's my final word for now on pagination is you got a bunch of trade-offs.
But I would also like, this was very awesome. And I would also like to add that I think it's awesome that Tracy is like on my side of the fence of doing queries and performance, because I know she's a hardcore DBA. So
Well,
anyway, I mean, it's good for the community too. It's not like oh, you're on my team now. It's like it's good that she has these very insightful questions as the role evolves.
in Tracy's case, I mean, I know she's not here, so I don't want to speak too much for her, but no, she was a report writer, so did a lot of
Oh,
report writing, report querying before becoming a DBA.
oh, okay, yeah, okay. So that was kind of ignorant of me, but yeah, okay, that makes sense.
But yeah, she spent a long time as a DBA at several places, and now doing more development. So Solomon says, I have an attempt at solving the pagination issue via SQL CLR, where I advance the internal result set cursor by fetching the next rows without requesting any columns until reaching the first row desired, and then getting the column data. That is an interesting approach. At the very least, you're not sending that data across the network until you reach the point. But yeah, it does rerun the same query every time. So possibly hitting the cache result and not truly re-executing. That's an interesting question of if it would cache those results between runs. But if so, it has its trade-offs, but probably would be fairly fast. And if not, it is still perhaps faster than the mechanisms that are used in fetch and offset. But that would be interesting. I think trying it on some very expensive queries that have rather expensive computations of very large amounts of data, and looking at larger page numbers. It would be interesting to have sort of a throwdown of pagination techniques.
Don't make me go against Solomon. I will lose.
But yeah, I could see CLR being absolutely a viable contender in that, considering that CLR-based solutions tend to be pretty fast on the whole. And this seems like the type of problem that I could imagine CLR being rather efficient at. But with that, I think let's try to cover one more topic real quick. That one more topic, maybe there will be a SQL Saturday Raleigh. Maybe. I say maybe because we need to find a venue. So publicly, this is why we haven't had a SQL Saturday Raleigh in a while, is we just can't find a venue that will host us. So I do want to call it out. If we do have one, mind you, it would not be until 2025. I would want to do it in late March, early April, that time frame, because I think that's the best time to be down here in the area. Summer hasn't started yet, so it's not too hot. We don't have to worry about football season. It'll be after March Madness. I'm not going to try to run this during March Madness because otherwise we'd have like 5 attendees. So going to try in that time frame, like tax day, somewhere around tax day. I found that is usually the best time to get people in the area. But we do need a venue, which has been the problem for the last few years. So I'll start making the call out. I'll probably do this on a regular cadence. But if you happen to know a place that may be able to host a SQL Saturday, talk to me.
Quick question. This would be like 60 people, 100 people, 200 people?
That's a really good question, because historically, SQL Saturday Raleigh has been more in the 200 or so area. But in a lot of places, attendance is at maybe 60% of what it was before. Some as low as 50%, some as high as, say, 70%. So probably I would guess for our first year in 2025, we'd be in the 140 to 160 area is my wild guess.
Okay. And I bring that up because you have been to this RTP Duke place that we used a few times before the pandemic. So I can talk to the site manager if there is a amphitheater on the first floor. I think it's probably like 60 people, but there's obviously multiple rooms and stuff. But if it's a Saturday, it's very different. It's different. It's a different ball of wax. I think if it's a Saturday, we might have a lot more flexibility. So I can talk to Carol Lee about that and you offline. But like, I don't want to discourage anyone on, the audience
To reach out and say, hey, here's a venue.
Because and you told me off screen, like it's just gotten incrementally so expensive that it's kind of like almost prohibitive for nonprofits kind of like us to do stuff.
When you can actually find a venue that will host. So a lot of places that used to host us say no. And of the places that are willing to say yes, I looked at the price and said no. So it is open. It is an idea. We're going to start pushing this probably a lot more come fall. But if we can find a venue by the end of this year, then we can host a SQL Saturday Raleigh. So keep that in mind. If you know a place, let me know. If you have any leads, any ins, let me know. And we'll try, if we can, to get something on the books for April. Pollen-mageddon, yes, during the pine pollen season. But don't worry, the giant pine pollen that looks like either it's rain or just covering everything in yellow, at least most people aren't allergic to that. So we got that going for us.
And Carlos will come, probably.
That might be an incentive for people. But in any event, we're here. We're done for today. I do want to point out tomorrow we will have Armando Lacerda. We had a false start last week. He wasn't able to make it, but we've got him booked for tomorrow. He's going to talk about Spark pools and Microsoft Fabric. So check that out, meetup.com/TriPass, or just show up here again tomorrow at about the same time, 6 p.m. Eastern time. We'll get started. So until we do see each other in a future meeting or Shop Talk episode or wherever, everybody, take care.